Serpent says is there's an echo on your side, I think, Paul. So is this at the most basic level an annihilation of Western civilization?
Yes, absolutely. Annihilation of civilization per se, but more specifically of Western civilization, which these people condemn as sexist, racist, whatever. I don't know, anti-Semitic. You got the Jewish elements of this too. That the Christians are bad. So I mean, what it does represent is cumulative grievances against Western civilization coming from various quarters, and the end, of course, would be the total destruction of Western civilization.
And what do they foresee on the other side of that? What emerges as a consequence of a collapse of Western civilization?
I really don't think they have much of a positive vision. I think they're violent and nihilistic. And this is one of the reasons I compare them to the Nazis. The Nazis, unlike the communists, do not really have a positive vision. They'll talk about an Aryan world or a new German race.
Now, I want to understand when you're saying Nazis now. Can you just give me kind of some context for that? Are you referring to people these days?
I'm referring to German Nazis. The German Nazis were in power.
Okay, gotcha.
I'm saying that what makes them similar in my mind. There's certain obvious interlap or overlaps that I see, or intersection between these movements, but they do remind me more of the Nazis than the communists in two ways. Number one, like the brown shirts, you have the Black Lives Matter and they're just violent. They just burn down cities and so forth. But like the Nazis, they enjoy a base of support, right? There's a kind of support system that they have. They're not just isolated nuts like the Communist Party in the United States in the 1950s, or so, which had very little support, really, although there were people who were soft on the communists and so forth. But, people weren't running to join the Communist Party. But these people have a very large base of support in the Democratic Party. There's an enormous, they have tens of millions of supporters in the Democratic Party who really like them, who are behind it, the riots and behind Black Lives Matter and so forth. So the base of support is something that they shared with the Nazis on there, and also the nihilistic violence. Second of all, I don't think that they have any positive vision. They want to just burn down and destroy. And this is something I think is also true with the Nazis. I'm not sure the Nazis have much of a positive vision, besides killing a lot of people, and some vague notion of an Aryan future or something like that. They're mostly about conquest and destruction, taking power and destroying enemies. The current left acts very much, and the anti-fascist left acts very much in the same way. I distinguish them from, let's say, Italian fascists who seem more civilized. They want to create a kind of neo-Roman empire or Roman state or some, and we might say it's nonsense, but there is some sort of vision there and a respect for civilization, which you find in Italian fascism.
I'm going to bring up some videos that I want everybody to see. I think that's an echo on your side. You might have to mute it. Did you just mute it? Paul, can you mute it on your side? Because I hear a little bit of an echo. But so I want to share some videos that we were discussing, and we were looking at right before we began, that are disturbing. And that kind of brings us to this conversation, which is Nazi. As a kid growing up, there was kind of a requirement that we learn about Nazis. I mean, I remember as a kid reading Mein Kampf, and it wasn't, it was almost everybody at that point was reading it, so we could have a kind of an idea of what it was and how a human being can become so distorted, right? And how it can become so displaced from a society. I remember reading it, and then I remember reading, I think everybody did, right? At that time, I'm 54, The Rise of the Third Reich. Remember that? Mm-hmm. And that was almost required reading. I was an inquisitive kid, but it was required reading. And now I see my wife's lost family to the Nazis. They were in Poland. And also lost family to the pogroms in Russia. So, so I have a good sense of the history. However, it's really become kind of like a washed up Polaroid for me. And I don't see any opportunity for me to really refresh my memory. And I'm 54, so I really can't be the only one. And I see all of these kids calling people Nazis. And so I have, I want you to respond to this quick. Actually, you know what I'm going to show? I'm going to bring up these things quickly, and then I'll show you this. Let's go back. Hold. It's craziness, but they have no, they don't really identify who their opponent or, you know, who they're after, other than this kind of a vague notion. And they're all very young. They're all very young. So there's just no way they've got any type of even a theoretical framework for what a Nazi is.
Yeah, of course, the thing that makes it the most frustrating is they claim to be fighting the Nazis. And this is true in Germany today, too, when they behave exactly like the Nazis. You know, it's they want to suppress everyone. They're violent. They do exactly. They want to close down any opposition, all in the name of fighting Nazism. And then they also condone violence and shooting people and so forth. So I think what has happened is that people have extracted all the wrong lessons from Nazi tyranny.
But now let's look at what the lessons are, right? So let's look at what these kids are being exposed to. And it's frightening. And you and I were just going over this, and Jack Posobiec and I have discussed it. And it's frightening because this is how history is imprinting these kids. So here's the first one from Jack Posobiec's movie, Antifa, the documentary. So I'm just going to share the videos of it. Okay. Let's progress a little bit. Let's let it roll on a little bit. We see kind of the style. It's a very forceful style. Now let's move on to what the next image. So these kids are seeing this type of image.
On or before January 20th, Donald Trump will no longer be the commander-in-chief. He will lose control of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, Special Forces, and America's nuclear arsenal. On January 20th, Donald Trump will become the commander-in-chief of a different army. This army.
That's frightening. I mean, just the two visuals together. But those two visuals together is the history that these kids are being, and these even adults are being imprinted with, and there's no reasoning in between the two of them. For them, history has collapsed. But for them, history has collapsed.
The most frightening thing are the media in the United States, which pushes this stuff, which practices gross intolerance, which tries to cancel people who disagree, you know, and are obvious totalitarians. They want totalitarian power, and they want a peace in a monolithic totalitarian regime that they're trying to right now establish in the United States. I don't think this is going to work, however. I am an optimist in the long run, because I think these people are too disunited and too crazy.
But how do you restore, I think you might have to mute, but how do you restore any type of equilibrium into their minds when these are the images? There's nothing in between those two images. There's this absolute outrageous images of the Third Reich and of Hitler, and those videos continue. And then the next ones are kind of a contemporary version. It's the same issues, like they've collapsed all of history.
The problem is that over 74 million people, and possibly more, voted for Donald Trump in the last election, and they don't believe any of this stuff. I think if the present administration proves as incompetent and as dangerous as it will soon become, or as it already is, they're just going to lose voters.
Okay, but let's just look at what it is. And I hate to interrupt, but I don't hate to interrupt, because this is like our dinner, and so many people are joining us, right? So if this were a dinner just between us, I would kind of interrupt, right? The 74 million people who voted for Trump, and I'm not advocating for or against. You know, everybody knows I try and stay away from it because I'm working on my log, right? But those 74 million people also have the same kind of disadvantage in information, right? They just know that those 74 million people also don't have that history, that informed history. So all they can say to themselves is, "I'm not a Nazi." They still don't have. I'm not a.
They're skeptical of the accusations that are made or the identification you just showed me.
That doesn't mean that they know what it is.
It doesn't make any difference. I mean, I'm around. I live in a town full of deplorables. No one would believe Donald Trump is Hitler. Okay, I mean, and the people who might buy this are the people who already are disposed in that direction. That's what I would argue. To me, the bigger problem is that the left, or that is allied to the Antifa, have already occupied the government, the Secret Service, are taking over the military in this country. It's going to be very hard to get those things back. The Democrats, by which I don't mean the Hubert Humphrey Democrats, the leftist totalitarian Democrats like our former president Obama and his supporters, were very, very careful to put their guys in charge of everything. And this, to me, is the immediate danger, that they're going to use their power to go after opposition, and they're support the media.
But how do you restore? So again, they've collapsed history. When I say they, I'm referring to kind of a collective. It's really not just one person or one party, right? How do you kind of inform now? How do you resolve that disequilibrium and that kind of collapsing of history and kind of inform everything that's in the middle? Kids today are not learning about Nazis. They're not learning about the Holocaust. What they're learning is what that clip you saw, punch a Nazi. Doesn't really need to identify who you're punching, only a Nazi. How do you?
Well, I mean, it's good. You already have people who are predisposed to believe those things for various reasons. And they would believe them even if they didn't see those pictures. That's what I would argue. They're already the armies of the left. They're the people who are going to vote for the left, who see, anyone who opposes them as another Hitler. They hear this on national public radio and so forth. I hear this in universities. Some believe it, others don't. The people who don't attend the elite universities don't get exposed.
I don't see it as exclusively a left issue. I see it kind of a universal issue that if you're not educating people on what something is, then everything is that thing. So,
I know this is strange coming from a scholar and a historian, but, I think many people can live with minimal knowledge of history as long as their morals are good, they're decent people. And they love their country, they love their family, they fear God and so forth. These are fine people. It'd be very nice, they take my history classes. I don't think I changed their lives very much. I think they were going in the right direction. It is the other people I find scary, the intellectual elites. I mean, they terrify me. The people with the high IQs terrify me because they're the ones who are going to destroy us. If there's any group that's going to pollute our society, destroy us politically, take away our freedom, it's the smart people and the intellectuals, who I think are extremely dangerous. So I'm not terribly concerned about my neighbors who don't know much about history. They're perfectly decent people and will go on being decent. Now, I am concerned that their children or grandchildren might start to believe these things. So I think it is necessary to counteract these narratives. But I don't think that if the pictures you showed me are going to have an immediate impact on tens of millions of people or anything like that. I don't even believe that this nonsense Project 1619 that shows America was founded as a racist slave society and this, I sort of wonder how much impact it's really going to have on the younger generation. I don't know, but.
It's an interesting question because I think about this a lot and I worry about this a lot because, is that your answer? That's so fun. So, if you just look at it in terms of temporal isolation and you say, this kid's reading the book and they can kind of dismiss it because there's an absurdity to it, right? Or, these visuals of punch a Nazi and Hitler have an absurdity to them. However, that in 5 years, that imprint, it becomes real. So it doesn't make a difference if it's not real today. It's real in 5 years. It's real in 10 years. So the history that, you know, what's being introduced to them today, and in terms of punching Nazis, it's a very dangerous thing. What's being introduced to them today doesn't need to be true. I remember going on your YouTube thing discussing this. It doesn't need to be true today. They're imprinting history for tomorrow.